Drone warfare is escalating between Russia and Ukraine, with both sides launching strikes that are pushing the conflict deeper into civilian life.
At 3:15 a.m. on October 11th, 2025, the unthinkable happened. A blinding flash lit up the night sky over western Russia, followed by a thunderous explosion that shattered windows in villages miles away.
The occupiers' markings have remained unchanged for the fourth year of the war.
Within minutes, the air was filled with flames, smoke, and chaos.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned that war is coming to Russia.
Ukraine had just launched a precision missile strike that wiped out what Moscow had long called its Invincible Fortress, a massive military base in the Bryansk region believed to be impenetrable. It wasn't just a military strike, it was a statement, a message to Russia and the world that no target, no matter how heavily defended, was beyond Ukraine's reach.
Than 20 kilometers away, and regular drone strikes have forced civilians to flee.
For years, this fortress had been a symbol of Russian power and technological superiority. Officially, it was known as the Bryansk Integrated Defense Command Center. But within Russian circles, it had a more intimidating nickname: Fort Zarya, meaning Fortress of the Dawn. The complex stretched over several square kilometers, with multiple underground bunkers, ammunition depots, radar towers, and command posts. It was the nerve center controlling missile operations along the Western Front, including drone and artillery coordination against Ukraine. Built deep inside Russian territory, it was surrounded by thick forests, shielded by layers of ES-400 and ES-500 missile systems, and guarded by elite security forces. Moscow often claimed it was the most secure military facility west of Moscow, a fortress that no foreign weapon could ever touch. But on that dark October morning, those words crumbled to ashes. The operation had been in the making for months. Ukrainian intelligence, supported by Western reconnaissance and satellite imagery, had been studying the site meticulously. Every radar sweep, every convoy movement, every maintenance cycle was analyzed. The fortress's defenses were sophisticated, but not perfect. And that's where Ukraine found its opportunity. According to leaked intelligence, the base's radar coverage required periodic recalibration, creating a temporary gap in detection capability once every few weeks. These brief windows of vulnerability usually lasted less than 20 minutes. Ukraine waited patiently for one of those moments, and when it came, they struck. At 2:45 a.m., two Ukrainian Su-24 bombers took off from secret airstrips somewhere in central Ukraine. Each carried two Storm Shadow missiles, British-made, long-range precision weapons known for their stealth and devastating accuracy. These weren't ordinary missiles. They had been modified with upgraded AI guidance systems that allowed them to adapt mid-flight, avoid jamming, and lock onto their targets even if decoy signals were deployed. The pilots flew in complete radio silence, skimming just above tree level to stay below radar coverage. Their mission was one of speed and precision. No backup, no second chances. At 3:15 a.m., the moment arrived. 4 Storm Shadows were launched almost simultaneously from Ukrainian airspace. Traveling at nearly 1,000 kilometers per hour, the missiles streaked across the border, undetected by Russia's supposedly unbreachable air defense network. The first missile struck the main command bunker, drilling through layers of reinforced concrete before detonating deep underground. The second slammed into the fuel storage depot, triggering a chain reaction of explosions that sent fireballs into the sky. The third missile hit the air defense control hub, disabling communication and response systems instantly. The fourth found its mark on the missile storage hangar, where hundreds of short-range ballistic warheads were kept, causing a blast so powerful that it lit up the night like a second sunrise. Within moments, the entire base was engulfed in flames. Witnesses in nearby towns described seeing the ground shaking like an earthquake. One local resident said, "The sky turned red and the air burned." We thought the world was ending. The explosions continued for nearly 20 minutes as secondary detonations from stored ammunition echoed across the region. By sunrise, all that remained of Russia's Invincible Fortress was a black crater. Satellite images released hours later confirmed what the Kremlin feared most: total annihilation. The command complex, radar towers, and bunkers had been completely vaporized. Over 80% of the base was gone. The once impenetrable walls were now piles of twisted steel and smoking rubble. Russia's response was immediate and confused. State television tried to claim that most of the missiles were intercepted, but social media told another story. Videos from local residents flooded Telegram and Twitter, showing enormous fireballs and mushroom-shaped clouds rising into the air. Even pro-Kremlin bloggers were forced to admit the truth. The Bryansk Fortress had been destroyed. Military insiders confirmed heavy casualties, including 2 colonels and a senior communications general, all of whom were in the command center during the strike. The Russian Ministry of Defense fell silent for nearly 12 hours before releasing a vague statement blaming sabotage and foreign interference.
Russian state media say a sabotage group working for Ukraine infiltrated a region in Russia.
But there was no sabotage. It was pure precision. In Kyiv, there were no public celebrations, no boasting. Ukrainian officials maintained their standard policy of strategic silence. However, a mysterious message appeared on the official Telegram channel of Ukraine's defense forces just hours after the strike. Fortresses fall, freedom does not. The message went viral. Within hours, hashtags like #FortressDown and #PrecisionRevenge trended across social media platforms worldwide. Analysts and journalists called it one of the most daring and effective strikes of the entire war.
Ukraine says 35 people have been killed in a Russian missile attack on a military base.
Military experts described the operation as a textbook example of modern hybrid warfare, a combination of intelligence, stealth, and artificial intelligence-guided precision. Western defense officials later confirmed that the missiles used in the operation were enhanced versions of the Storm Shadow, featuring real-time terrain mapping and adaptive target-locking technology. In simpler terms, even if Russia's jammers tried to confuse the missiles mid-flight, they could reorient and hit their target anyway. It was a nightmare scenario for Russian air defenses. Their expensive radar systems, which had cost billions to develop, were rendered useless against Ukraine's smart weapons. For Moscow, the psychological blow was immense. The fortress wasn't just a military site. It was a symbol of safety, a reminder to Russian citizens that their homeland was protected. That illusion had just been shattered. Overnight, panic spread among military and civilian circles alike. Reports emerged of Russian troops relocating assets deeper into the country. Air defense units were repositioned, and radar systems were put on maximum alert. The Kremlin convened an emergency meeting, with President Vladimir Putin reportedly furious and demanding explanations. Inside the Russian military command, chaos reigned. Some generals blamed poor intelligence. Others claimed the system failure was due to Western cyber interference. But the truth was simpler. Ukraine had outsmarted them. They had turned Russia's strength into its weakness. As the smoke settled over Bryansk, international reactions poured in. Western leaders privately applauded the operation, though few commented publicly to avoid escalating tensions. A senior NATO analyst was quoted saying, "This wasn't just a strike on a building. It was a strike on Russia's confidence." Another expert called it the beginning of a new phase of warfare, where technology and precision outweigh numbers and fear. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the mood was one of quiet pride. The country had endured years of brutal attacks, missile barrages, and blackouts caused by Russian strikes. This victory was personal. It wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. and proving that even a smaller nation could stand tall against a superpower. Across Kiev, people shared messages of hope and strength. "We fight with brains, not just bombs," one Ukrainian wrote online. The destruction of the fortress also had significant tactical consequences. Intelligence reports confirmed that several drone and missile attacks on Ukraine were coordinated from the Bryansk Command Center. With that hub gone, Russia's Western assault operations were paralyzed for weeks. Ukrainian forces along the front lines noticed a sudden drop in missile activity. It was as if the enemy's eyes and ears had been ripped out overnight. For the Kremlin, the event was an embarrassment they couldn't hide. Russian state TV avoided showing footage of the ruins, instead airing archived videos of military parades. But independent journalists and satellite companies released detailed images showing the scale of devastation. The photos went viral across the world. Charred vehicles, craters the size of apartment buildings, and melted steel towers sticking out like bones from the earth. That day, the term Invincible Fortress became a symbol of failure, a reminder that arrogance and overconfidence can be deadlier than any bomb. Russian morale took a deep hit. Soldiers on the front lines began questioning the effectiveness of their own command. Civilian bloggers in Moscow openly mocked the government's earlier boasts about their unbreakable defense systems. As night fell again over Bryansk, the fires were still burning. The air was filled with smoke, and the once bustling fortress had turned into a graveyard of steel. For miles, nothing moved except emergency vehicles and military trucks removing debris. The eerie silence that followed was more powerful than the explosions themselves. It was the sound of a wounded empire realizing it could bleed. Ukraine's operation would later be codenamed Iron Spear. Intelligence officials revealed that it had been rehearsed multiple times using digital simulations and drone reconnaissance. Every move, every second, had been calculated. The mission had a 14-minute launch window, and everything went exactly as planned. Not a single Ukrainian aircraft was detected or lost. The level of precision stunned even Western allies. In the days that followed, Putin's government scrambled to restore control. Russian propaganda channels released contradictory statements, some claiming it was an internal explosion, others blaming NATO interference. But no explanation could erase the satellite images or silence the witnesses. The truth was already out. Ukraine had struck at the heart of Russia and won. Weeks later, military experts continued to analyze the operation. Many called it a historic milestone in modern warfare, comparing it to Israel's 1981 Osirak reactor strike or the US raid that killed Osama bin Laden. But this mission was different. Ukraine had pulled it off while under daily bombardment, with limited resources and against overwhelming odds. It was David defeating Goliath, not with a slingshot, but with science, intelligence, and sheer courage. In the end, the 3:15 a.m. strike didn't just destroy a fortress, it destroyed an illusion. It proved that even the most advanced military machine can be undone by a nation that refuses to surrender. For Ukraine, it was a moment of pride, a reminder that resilience and precision can change the course of war. For Russia, it was humiliation, a harsh lesson that walls, no matter how high, cannot protect arrogance forever. And as the world watched the flames fade into the cold Russian dawn, one truth became undeniable. The age of untouchable fortresses is over, and Ukraine just proved it.